The stage was set for a fiery debate. The camera zoomed in on Mike Huckabee, his tone already sharp as he leaned forward in his chair. "Representative Crockett," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "your policies and your attitude don't reflect the values this country was built on. Frankly, I question whether you even understand morality at all." The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the jab wasn't just political but personal. Huckabee raised his hand dramatically, trying to seize control of the moment. "Don't preach to me about fairness and justice when you ignore the foundation of this nation, the Bible. You want power, but you have no values." The crowd gasped. The moderator froze for a second, unsure if this was crossing the line. Huckabee smirked, convinced he had cornered her. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She adjusted her microphone, leaned forward calmly, and prepared to answer in a way that no one in the room expected. Jasmine Crockett's expression remained calm, almost serene, as the lights glared and all eyes fixed on her. She let Huckabee's words hang in the air just long enough to build tension before she spoke. "Governor Huckabee," she said smoothly, "I appreciate your passion, but let's not twist the Bible into a political weapon. The same scripture you claim to defend reminds us in Matthew 7, 'Do not judge, or you too will be judged.'" The room stirred. Some audience members murmured in surprise while others broke into quiet applause. Huckabee shifted in his seat, clearly not expecting her to fire back with scripture. Crockett leaned closer to the microphone. "If you want to talk values, let's be clear, the Bible doesn't command us to belittle or attack each other. It calls us to love our neighbors and to speak truth with integrity. That's what I stand for." The crowd erupted into cheers, the moderator finally stepping back in to regain control of the stage. Huckabee's smirk faded as the camera caught his unease. For the first time in the debate, the momentum had shifted, instantly. Huckabee cleared his throat, trying to regain his footing. He forced a chuckle, waving his hand dismissively. "Quoting one verse doesn't make you a preacher, Representative. You can't cherry-pick scripture to excuse your radical ideas." The audience's cheers faded into uneasy silence. Some leaned forward, waiting for Crockett's response. She didn't rush. She simply folded her hands on the table, her composure unshaken. "Radical ideas," she repeated calmly. "Caring for the poor, standing up for justice, protecting the vulnerable, those aren't radical. They are the very core of the gospel. Isaiah 1 verse 17 says, 'Learn to do right, seek justice. Defend the oppressed.' That's not my agenda, that's God's command." The crowd exploded again, louder this time, forcing the moderator to raise a hand to quiet them. Huckabee's face tightened. He hadn't expected her to outquote him, let alone with verses that directly undercut his attack. Jasmine Crockett didn't even smile. She just let the words stand, the echo of the scripture lingering in the room like a challenge Huckabee couldn't easily dismiss. Huckabee shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his confidence starting to crack. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice louder now, almost desperate. "Representative, don't twist the good book into your political platform. The people know the truth, faith isn't about politics, it's about obedience." His words echoed through the studio, but instead of applause, there was a heavy silence. Viewers could feel the tension rising. Jasmine Crockett straightened her back and spoke with measured authority. "Obedience," she said firmly. "Obedience to God means following His greatest commandment, to love one another. 1 Corinthians 13 tells us that without love, everything else is meaningless. You can quote authority all you want, but if your message lacks compassion, you've already lost the heart of the scripture." The audience roared, clapping and even standing in the back rows. The moderator's eyes widened, realizing the debate had transformed into something far larger than politics. It was a moral showdown. Huckabee pressed his lips tightly, his usual witty retorts failing him. Crockett's words had hit deeper than expected, leaving him visibly shaken under the studio lights. The camera zoomed in on Huckabee's face as he tried to maintain composure. His fingers tapped nervously on the table. He had walked into the debate expecting to dominate with strong rhetoric, but now the audience wasn't with him anymore, they were hanging on Crockett's every word. He leaned forward, voice sharp. "Representative, you're twisting love into an excuse for reckless policies. Real leadership means discipline, not handouts." Crockett didn't blink. She leaned toward her microphone with calm certainty. "Discipline without mercy is cruelty, and leadership without compassion is tyranny," she replied. Her voice carried through the hall, firm but steady. Even Proverbs 31 calls on leaders to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, ensure justice for those being crushed. If you believe in the Bible, Governor, then you should already know that defending the powerless isn't weakness, it's responsibility. The crowd erupted once again, some people rising to their feet. The moderator tried to shush them, but the energy was unstoppable. For the first time, Huckabee's eyes darted toward the floor. The scripture he had tried to wield like a sword had been turned back on him with precision. And the audience knew it. Huckabee inhaled deeply, searching for words. His usual confidence was faltering, but he wasn't ready to surrender. "You can quote verses all night," he said, forcing a grin, "but quoting scripture doesn't make your policies righteous. The people can see through political theater." The audience muttered, sensing his attempt to recover. But Crockett's eyes remained steady, her tone calm yet cutting. "This isn't theater," she said. "This is about truth. And the truth is simple, you cannot claim faith while ignoring what it demands of us. James 2 verse 17 says, faith without works is dead. If we believe, then we act, with compassion, with justice, with humility." The words landed like a hammer. The crowd roared so loudly the moderator had to pause the debate for a moment. Even the cameramen exchanged glances, realizing they were filming something unforgettable. Huckabee sat back in his chair, his smile gone. His arguments had run dry, while Crockett's steady command of scripture made his attacks look shallow by comparison. For the first time that night, he seemed unsure if continuing the fight was even worth it. The moderator finally regained control, gesturing for the crowd to quiet down. "Governor Huckabee," he said, "would you like to respond?" Huckabee leaned into the microphone, his voice lower now, stripped of its earlier bravado. "Representative Crockett, you're clever with words, I'll give you that. But faith isn't just about quoting verses, it's about action, about living by God's will. And frankly, your politics undermine that." The words were meant to sound strong, but his delivery lacked fire. Jasmine Crockett, however, didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her voice unwavering. "Then let's talk about action, Governor. Because when children go hungry, when families can't afford medicine, when injustice goes unchecked, silence is not faith, it's failure. The Bible doesn't ask us to sit back and do nothing. It calls us to act." The audience burst into thunderous applause, nearly drowning her out. Huckabee's shoulders slumped ever so slightly, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Even the moderator looked at her with a hint of admiration. This wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a sermon, and the crowd was clearly moved. The camera zoomed in on Crockett as the applause slowly settled. She didn't rush, she let the silence linger, letting her words carry even more weight. "Governor," she continued, her tone firm yet composed, "you accuse me of politics. But let me remind you, politics is nothing more than how we choose to care for one another as a society. If our choices don't reflect love, mercy, and justice, then we've lost our way." Huckabee swallowed hard. His usual sharp comebacks refused to surface. He opened his mouth as if to interject, but the audience's energy drowned him out, cheers, whistles, claps shaking the studio walls. Crockett turned slightly toward the crowd, her voice rising just enough to reach every corner of the room. "We are commanded to love our neighbors, not just the ones who vote like us, not just the ones who agree with us, but all of them. That's the standard. That's the scripture." The moderator glanced at Huckabee, but he stayed silent. His eyes flickered with frustration, but also resignation. For the first time in the night, it was clear he had no path to win this exchange. Huckabee sat stiffly, gripping the edge of the desk. He could feel the momentum slipping entirely out of his control, the crowd leaning toward Crockett as though she were the only voice on the stage. He tried once more, forcing his tone into a thin smile. "You make it sound simple, Representative, but the world isn't that easy. Leadership requires strength, not soft words dressed as scripture." Crockett's reply came without hesitation. "Strength isn't about how loud you speak or how hard you strike, it's about how firmly you stand for what's right. Jesus said in Matthew 25 that whatever we do for the least of these, we do for him. That is strength. That is leadership." The room shook with applause, louder than before. Some audience members stood again, clapping with both hands above their heads. The moderator struggled to calm the cheers, but it was clear the debate had taken on a life of its own. Huckabee's face flushed red. He leaned back, shoulders stiff, realizing every attempt to counter her only gave her more room to shine. Crockett's words had cut through the noise, leaving the studio charged with a sense that history was being made right there, live on television. The moderator finally leaned in, sensing the imbalance. "Representative Crockett, one last response before we move on." Jasmine nodded, her voice calm but commanding. "Governor Huckabee claims leadership is strength without compassion. But the Bible reminds us in Micah 6 verse 8 what the Lord requires: to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. That's not weakness, that's divine instruction." The audience erupted, cheers, whistles, even chants of her name. The sound rolled through the studio like a wave, impossible to ignore. Huckabee shifted in his chair, his jaw tight, his hand pressed flat on the desk. He looked less like the dominant figure he had been at the start and more like a man cornered, unsure of how to escape. Crockett didn't gloat. She simply folded her hands again, her voice steady. "If quoting the Bible is theater, then perhaps it's time we all remembered the script." The crowd roared again, the moment sealing itself as one that would be replayed across news outlets and social media within minutes. Huckabee sat in silence, the fight drained from him. For the first time, the governor had no words. The moderator's eyes darted between the two, sensing that Huckabee had no comeback left. The cameras captured every detail, the stiffness in his posture, the frustration in his clenched jaw, the ease and calm on Crockett's face. In the audience, people were already pulling out their phones, recording clips, knowing this exchange would go viral before the night was over. Crockett leaned forward one final time, her voice unwavering. "Governor, the problem isn't whether we can quote scripture, it's whether we live by it. And if we truly believe, then our words and actions should reflect love, justice, and humility. Anything less isn't faith, it's performance." The silence that followed wasn't weakness, it was power. The kind of silence where the weight of truth hangs heavier than any shouted argument. The crowd broke into thunderous applause again, louder than at any other moment that night. The studio lights glared on Huckabee as he stared down at his notes, knowing he had been outmatched. Jasmine Crockett sat back, composed, letting the audience's reaction speak for itself. The debate wasn't just over, it was ended. The moderator raised his hand, signaling the debate had to move forward, but everyone knew the highlight had already happened. Huckabee sat in silence, his earlier confidence completely gone. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett remained steady, her presence radiating calm authority. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't insulted, she had answered his attack with scripture and conviction, leaving no room for doubt. As the cameras panned across the audience, faces glowed with admiration. Some were nodding, others were clapping even as the moderator struggled to restore order. That single Bible quote, delivered with precision and faith, had ended the fight instantly. Huckabee looked defeated, while Crockett walked away stronger than ever, her words echoing far beyond the studio. By the time the debate wrapped up, social media was already ablaze. Clips of the exchange spread like wildfire, headlines praising Crockett's calm but devastating response. It was more than just a political moment, it was a reminder that truth, spoken with courage, could silence even the loudest attacks. The next morning, news outlets across the country replayed the viral clip on a loop. Headlines blared, "Crockett's Bible quote ends Huckabee's attack," and "Debate moment shakes the political stage." Huckabee's camp scrambled to do damage control, but every attempt only fueled the story further. Critics accused him of trying to weaponize scripture, while commentators praised Crockett for her composure and authenticity. Meanwhile, Crockett's name trended on every major platform. Supporters flooded her with messages, calling her a voice of strength and clarity. What had started as an attack meant to embarrass her had turned into a defining moment that elevated her on the national stage. And as Huckabee's silence lingered, Crockett's words kept echoing in living rooms, churches, and online feeds everywhere. If quoting the Bible is theater, then perhaps it's time we all remembered the script. The fight hadn't just ended that night, it had reshaped the conversation entirely. In the days that followed, the debate moment became more than just political theater, it became a cultural flashpoint. Commentators on television, pastors in Sunday sermons, and even students in classrooms referenced Crockett's calm but forceful stand. Clips of her quoting scripture were shared millions of times, often with captions like, "This is how you answer an attack," and "Faith with courage." The viral spread turned her words into a rallying cry. Huckabee, once confident in his ability to dominate such exchanges, faded from the spotlight. His attempt to corner her with faith had backfired so spectacularly that even some of his supporters quietly admitted he had lost the fight. For Jasmine Crockett, it was more than a victory in one debate, it was a defining moment in her career. She hadn't just defended herself, she had set a new standard for how to confront hostility, not with anger, but with truth, courage, and conviction. And long after the cameras shut off and the stage went dark, the message still lingered across the nation, proof that sometimes, one verse spoken with integrity can silence an entire storm.